How many of you have ever seen Hamilton? Ever seen Hamilton? One of the greatest male singers of all time is in Hamilton. Leslie Odom Jr. But how many of you know the song? How many of you know the name of the song that George Washington sings before he goes back to Mount Vernon and stops being president? One last time. That's the name of the song. In that song, One Last Time, George Washington is shocking by making the announcement that he is no longer going to be president of the United States. Now, you got to remember, back then, there was no term limits. So it was not in the Constitution that George Washington actually had to stop becoming president. He could have stayed president and run again, and he would have won again. No, make no mistake about it. But he felt like it was important for everyone to move on without him, that the power was in, the people, not in one person. And so he decided, I'm going to retire. I'm going back to Mount Vernon. This caused, in the musical Hamilton, Hamilton great turmoil, because he looked up to Washington. He thought Washington was wonderful and great and fantastic, and he didn't want to lose that. And it actually caused somewhat of a crisis in the entire nation, because since the birth of the nation, everybody had George Washington as the leader. This was the guy who was leading the nation for us. Anybody remember who becomes second president of the United States? Yes. John Adams. Wasn't that little guy that came to see me? That's kind of where Israel finds themselves at the beginning of the book of Isaiah. King Uzziah had been king for 52 years. Longer than a bunch of the people in the kingdom had even been alive. He had been king for 52 years. And he was a good king at the beginning of his reign. At the end, he started doing some bad stuff, led the people with some bad stuff. And when he dies, there is this mix of gratitude for what he has done, but then at the same time wondering, okay, what's going to happen now? Like, where are we going to go as a nation now? Because we were already kind of floundering around at the end. We were kind of flopping around, not really knowing, not really having good direction. And we don't know where we're going to go from here. It is in that context that God raises up Isaiah to be his prophet. Okay? Earthly leaders come and go. Even great ones like George Washington. Even long-lasting ones like Uzziah. The real king, the high king of heaven that we just sang about, never leaves his throne. When Isaiah encounters this vision of God that we're going to read about, it is going to leave him in a very vulnerable place of surrender. And I want us to take a look at it tonight. We're going to read the first 8 verses. Just to let you know, we're not going to talk a great deal about the actual vision itself. I mean, we're gonna have to use it, obviously, because it's the context of the prayer. But I want us to really look at the prayer that Isaiah prays after the encounter with God. And then we'll finish up with Jesus, which is always a good place to end. Verse 1, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Okay, so he is seeing the throne room of God. He is getting a vision of God's throne room. And he sees the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Probably just a symbolic way of saying his glory filled up everything. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory. And the foundations of the threshold begin to shake at the voice of him who called. And the house was filled with smoke. And I said, woe is me. I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King of the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched it to my mouth. And he said, behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for or forgiven. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And then I said, here am I, Lord, send me. This prayer breaks down really into 3 C's. Confession, okay? Confession, cleansing, and then commission. It's not the points up there, but this is kind of how this prayer goes. This first aspect of confession is really about recognizing Isaiah's sin. Now, in chapter 5, Isaiah has pronounced 5 woes. Somebody tell me, what do you think a woe is? And besides just being like, whoa. What is a woe? Isaiah here gives 5 woes upon Israel. Jesus gives woes against the Pharisees during his ministry. What is a woe, Shelby? It is a warning, and it is, but it's not a warning where you really have any ability. Like a judgment. Yes, like no ability to change. Like, this is what you've done, this is what's coming upon you. And woe is you for having to experience this. Okay? Here, though, in chapter 5, the woe is out. Isaiah is declaring the woes on Israel. In fact, there's a woe for their greed, their drunkenness, their arrogance, their moral confusion, and their corrupt leadership. Woe on you, God's judgment and wrath is coming upon you for these things. But notice, when he sees the Lord high and lifted up, where does his attention turn? Is his attention turned outward? Look at it. Look at verse 5. Where is his attention turned when he sees the Lord high and lifted up? To himself. Chapter 5, woe is you, woe is you, woe is you, woe is you, woe is you. He sees the Lord high and lifted up, and immediately where does his attention go? Woe is me. Woe is me. Guys, it is easy to compare yourself to other people. Why? Why is it easy for you to compare yourself to other people? Why is that easy? Yeah. Or, let's the other side. Here's why comparison is so easy. You can always find somebody that's doing it worse than you to make yourself feel better about how you're doing it. It's so easy to find somebody else who's not doing it and be like, well, at least I'm not as bad as that person, right? If Isaiah compared himself to the rest of the nation of Israel, would Isaiah be able to think highly of himself? If he compared himself to the rest of Israel, yeah, it'd be easy for him. I mean, look at the things I just said. Greed, drunkenness, arrogance, moral confusion, corrupt leadership. If Isaiah compared himself to that, he could really feel good about himself. But who does he compare himself to after he sees the Lord high and lifted up? To the Lord. He feeling good about himself? No. Once he compares himself to Yahweh high and lifted up, then he sees himself for where he really is. Standing before God's holiness, exposed not just society's sin, but Isaiah's own sin, his personal sin. What does he say? He calls out, specifically, what does he call out? Woe is me, for I am a man of what? Look at it in verse 5. Of what? Unclean lips. Now stop and think with me here. What is Isaiah's calling? To speak. What is he? He's a prophet. His job is to speak the words of God. Don't you find it interesting that the one thing that he points out as being unclean is his mouth? Right? He doesn't start with my hands, my feet, my eyes, my brain, my heart. Why does he start with mouth, do you think? Somebody that has an answer. Why do you think he starts with mouth? Remember, what's he called to be? A prophet who speaks for Yahweh. And he says, I am a man of unclean lips. Awesome.
Because he has to speak the word of God, so it has to be perfect.
But how is he viewing his mouth compared to the words of God? Unworthy, unclean. I am not worthy of speaking your words. My mouth is unclean. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among people of unclean lips. The very instrument of his calling did not match God's holiness. In Luke chapter 5, verse 8, you have this in front of you in your notes. You've got this verse. It says, Peter, after seeing Jesus' power, falls on his knees and says, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. Who was Peter comparing himself to? Jesus. And what it calls him to do? Fall on his face. Have you guys noticed? By the way, this is, I think, our 26th message on prayer that we have done in 2025. Have you noticed a common refrain that comes up in prayers over and over and over and over again? We've been looking at all these prayers. Have you noticed something that continually kind of comes up? And what does that represent? That is their posture. What does that posture represent? Well, what does it mean to be on your face? What does it mean to be on your knees? What are you doing before the Lord? You're humbling yourself, right? Over and over and over again, in these prayers that we've been looking at, from Genesis now up to Isaiah, we have seen a common refrain. Prayer begins with your humility. It begins with you recognizing who you are in light of God. The very reason why you're coming to him is because you recognize you're not enough. How many of you have ever flipped through an old yearbook and laughed? You ever flipped through an old yearbook and laughed at the pictures you've seen? It cracks me up when I'll pull out an old year. Now I'm 47 years old. Okay, 47 years old. I could pull up yearbooks from 1985 when I was in kindergarten. Okay, 1985 kindergarten. When you start flipping through those pages, it is very easy to laugh at how everybody looks ridiculous. Then you come to the 1985 kindergarten class and you got to look at yourself. And you're like, oh, dang, I looked ridiculous. For some reason, my parents didn't have my hair trimmed, and my hair was like hanging over my ears and kind of just shooting out like this. A very weird look. And it's easy to laugh at everybody else, but then you look at yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, why did my parents dress me like that? Why did my wife, when she was in junior high, well, my wife had glasses since she was 2 years old, and we're talking about thick glasses, y'all. I'm talking about like thick, y'all. And her mom got her, not only was the actual lens thick, but then her mom got the biggest frames for these things. And Jessica looks back at herself. She's like, what was my mother thinking? making me look like that. Well, that's kind of where we're at with Isaiah. Like, it's easy for Isaiah to look at everybody else and laugh and mock, and not that he was doing that, but it would be easy for him to. But now he flips to the page that he's on, and he sees that he is far from perfect. He was not holy at all, especially compared to God's holiness. Now look at verses 6 and 7. Isaiah says, I am unclean, and then he says, I am undone. The word lost there, he says, woe is me, for I am lost. I'm a man of unclean lips. I am dwelled in the midst of people of unclean lips. He is undone. The word lost there can mean undone. I'm coming apart at the seams because of who I am compared to you, God. And then what does one of the angels do? What does it say one of the angels does in verse 6? Takes tongs, goes and grabs a coal from the altar. Now, when you hear altar, what would happen on the altar? You would sacrifices on the altar. That's why the coals would be hot, right? Interesting, I say we're going to talk about the vision too much. Does the angel touch the coal with his hands? He gets an instrument. He doesn't even think he's worthy enough to touch the coal himself. We'll come back to that in a minute. He takes the coal, and what does he touch with it? The lips of Isaiah. And he says, your guilt is taken away. Your sin has been atoned for. You are forgiven. He cleanses him entirely. Now, whose initiative was the cleansing? Was it the angels? Was it the Lord's? Was it Isaiah? Who's initiating the cleansing? God is. Isaiah doesn't say, forgive me. Take away my sin. He just says, I'm undone. Woe is me. I'm a sinner. I got unclean lips. And God says, let me cleanse you of that. Reminds me of Psalm 51, which we did. David's prayer, remember, after he sins with Bathsheba? We talked about this. He says, purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Can you clean something by using, let's say you have a muddy shirt, okay? Can you clean the muddy shirt with the muddy shirt? Say you got paint all over your hands. Can you clean the paint off of your hands with the paint that's on your hands? No. What do you got to use? Something outside of yourself, something other than the muddy shirt, something other than the paint to clean that off. Isaiah is like the muddy shirt. There's nothing he could do to cleanse himself. Nothing he can do to get himself clean. God does it. This is God's initiative. God does it from the outside and makes it possible. Isaiah needed cleansing, he needed restoration, and that's exactly what he got from the Lord. And then look at this, the responding in obedience. After the confession, after the cleansing, comes the commission. What question does God ask in verse 8? What question does he ask? Whom shall I send for me? Whom shall I send? And now Isaiah, forgiven, restored, responds with, here am I, send me. Notice the order. God does not commission Isaiah while Isaiah is still undone and broken. He cleanses him, forgives him, restores him, then commissions him out. The restoration is preparation for the readiness. Okay? The restoration is preparation for the readiness. It's what got him ready to respond this way. Here am I, Lord. Send me. Forgiveness will transform a fearful sinner into a willing servant. John chapter 20, Jesus looks at the disciples and he says, As the Father has sent me, so am I sending you. It's like a soldier who gets wounded, comes back, the medic treats the soldier, heals the whatever injury it is, completely healed. The soldier doesn't want to pack it up and just go home. What does he want to do? He wants to go back out in the field. I'm not going to leave my brothers behind. I'm going back out. God does not heal us to make us comfortable. He heals us to send us out. Now, look at this prayer. Isaiah sees the Lord high and lifted up. His response is a confession of humility. Lord, I'm not what I should be. Lord, I am not worthy to be seeing this or to be in your presence or to have this vision. I am not worthy of this. And God, in that humility, God comes to restore. God is never, listen to me, anytime you come to God in a prayer of confession and humility, He is never going to humiliate you. He's going to restore you. Every time. You don't ever have to worry about going to God in humility and brokenness and wondering how God is going to respond to you. He is your Father. He is a good Father. He will restore you and encourage you and lift you up. And then He will turn your face back where it needs to go, and slap you on the rear, say, get back out there and do what you're supposed to be doing. It's like a dad would do. Now I want to end with something crazy. This is a side note, not really about the prayer, it's a side note. Turn to John chapter 12. Turn to John chapter 12. I want you to see this because it's very important. John chapter 12. We're going to look at verse 41. Jesus has done a bunch of miracles in front of the people. The people still have great unbelief. The disciples are confused. They don't know why these people aren't believing. They're like, how can you not believe? He's been healing people and people coming back from the dead. And how can you not believe this is the Messiah? And in verse 36, it says, when Jesus had said these things, He departed. He hid Himself from all of these people that were following Him. And though He had done many signs before them, they still did not believe in Him. Verse 38, so that the word spoken to the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. God is going to tell Isaiah, Isaiah, your mission. You said, here am I, Lord, send me. Your mission is to preach judgment and hardness on the hearts of the people of Israel. Isaiah said, how long do I got to do this? And he said, until the land is desolate. Until all these rebellious people are done away with. Now, Jesus is on the scene. Okay? People are not believing. The disciples say, why? What is John's answer? John's answer is, they don't believe because the judgment of God from Isaiah is still true. Seeing they do not see, hearing they do not hear. Now, this is what I want you to see. Look at verse 41. Isaiah said these things because he saw His glory and spoke of Him. I need you to put your thinking cap on. John says Isaiah said these things because he, Isaiah, saw His glory. Who does that pronoun refer to? Not being specific enough. Jesus. Listen, check this out. These people see Jesus and they don't believe. John says they don't believe because of what Isaiah, his message, that these people are judged. That's why they're not believing. And then he says, but Isaiah saw his glory. So here's what this means. When Isaiah saw the Lord high and lifted up in Isaiah chapter 6, who was he seeing? A pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. He was seeing the Son of God. He was seeing Jesus in Isaiah chapter 6. This is the glory of Jesus. This means that the Holy One that Isaiah trembled before, the King who cleansed him, and the Lord who commissioned him was none other than Jesus himself. So how do these three C's work for us? Confession, cleansing, commission. Confession. When we pray today, we're not just going to some vague, far-off God of holiness. We're coming before Jesus. Two, the coal from the altar pointed forward to the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. That's why the angel couldn't touch it. The reason why the angel couldn't touch it was because that sacrifice was too holy for the angel to touch. Why? Because it pointed forward to Jesus' sacrifice. The sacrifice of the finished work of Jesus Christ that cleanses us completely. And then the same Lord, here's the commission, the same Lord who forgave Isaiah sends us out today. We're commissioned today. So when we pray, we are praying to the same high and lifted up Yahweh that Isaiah prayed to, but now we know that's Jesus. The man Jesus Christ in all of his resurrected glory, righteous and holy. We come to him always in humility, never with arrogance. We come to him humbly, knowing that he is the one who has forgiven us of our sin, and he is the one who sends us to live the lives we're supposed to live.